Okay, so it started. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Cantrell. I'm a narrator. I live up on the Pacific Northwest, and I'm here today with Tekla Madsen and Donna Schmuck. Um, and we're the team behind Bad Juju in Cleveland, the audiobook. Um, so we just kind of wanted to get a little video out there and show everybody who we are and kind of how we went through this whole process together to create what we just released on audible.com and Amazon, a Bad Juju in Cleveland. So let's just do a quick introduction of who everybody is, and then we'll kind of get into the weeds, as they say, of how this all came to be. So, hello, ladies, how are you?
Great.
Hey, Mike. Good.
So, Donna, why don't you tell everybody a bit about yourself, where you're from, and your tie into Bad Juju?
I don't want to get emotional. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine, and I can cut out anything you want, or we can just roll.
My name is Donna, and Carl is my dad, and he's the author of Bad Juju in Cleveland, based on his real Carl Bort, based on his real experience as a undercover narcotics, and Juju is a real person.
And whereabouts are you from?
I'm in the Cleveland, Ohio area.
Excellent.
Cleveland.
Well, thank you for joining us. Tekla?
Yeah, I'm co-author of Bad Juju in Cleveland, and Carl and I were introduced by actually a friend of mine. Carl had the bones of the story for Bad Juju, and he was looking for an editor. And he talked to a friend of mine, and that friend contacted me and thought that Carl and I would make a good fit for working together, and we did. And I was introduced to Carl in either like 2012 or 2013, and we started working on Bad Juju and completing the manuscript.
Excellent. So, real quick, my name is Mike Cantrell. I've been doing voiceover. Well, I've been an actor most of my life. I've been doing voiceover. My official business has been up and running for about 4 years. This is my second audiobook. I mostly have done commercials, documentaries, web explainers. So audiobooks are definitely a marathon. It's definitely not a quick hit voice. There's so many characters, and I view everything as a performance, and I want to bring my all to that performance. As you see, I'm standing up in my booth right now. I don't like to sit down because I really get into it. But Bad Juju in Cleveland, I read it mostly before I started speaking it, but it just flew right off the page. So it was an extremely good story. One of 3 of the Detective Nicholas Salvano series. Anyway, that's a little bit of backstory about me. So how about let's get into the book and really where it started with Carl. Donna, can you tell us a little bit about your perspective and what you think, what inspired your dad to really sit down and write this story?
Oh, yeah, I know. My dad was an avid reader. Like, I just remember when I was younger, he'd read like Shogun like in 2 days. So he read he has boxes and boxes of books, read all the time. And we used to watch like CSI Miami, like all those made up cop shows on TV. And we're sitting at their house watching it, and he turns to me and he goes, "I got better stories than this." I was like, "Why don't you write a book?" He's like, "Maybe I will." And at the time, he worked night shift because when he retired from being a policeman, he became a nurse. He became an LPN. And I'm a registered nurse, and I worked in the emergency room, and he at a hospital, and he worked in the psych unit night shift. So maybe like 2 or 3 months later, he's like, "Oh, hey, I started that book." I'm like, "What are you reading now?" And he goes, "No, I'm writing a book." I'm like, "You're writing a book?" He goes, "Yeah, you told me to." And he goes, "Don't you remember we were watching TV and you dared me to write a book?" I'm like, "Oh, that's right, I did." So he goes, I thought about it and I came up with a story, and he started writing it working night shift in the psych unit.
Wow. Did he share any of that as he was writing it with you?
Yeah, he used to send me each chapter when he was done.
Very cool.
And then ask me to read it. And he would always put people's names in there, but he'd be like, "I'll change them later." And like all my friends and like family are like, I want to be in the book. I want to be in the book. And like my one girlfriend's like, I want to be a hooker. And my dad's like, you want to be a hooker? And she's like, yeah, I want to be something fun in this book, you know? So everybody like basically auditioned to be in the book. But most of all the characters are real people. And if he used a real name, he had people sign, you know, releasing it. But yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. I don't ever think he thought he was going to write one full book, let alone 3. Like Tekla said, he had the bones for it, and he wrote it out. He typed with 2 fingers. If anybody wants to know, he was a lefty, and he's like, and he just, you know, he needs somebody to make it booky, you know, edit, like she said, edit it and make it flow and make it into a story. So that's how him and Tekla met.
Well, Tekla, can you kind of explain a little bit of that, how you got connected with Carl and a little bit about that?
Yeah, like I said earlier, we got connected through a mutual friend of mine, Rob Bignell, who has his own book editing services. But usually when Rob gets a book, it's a done manuscript, very much completed. And Carl's, like we said, it was the bones of a book, and it needed more. And because I love reading crime thrillers and watch all those same TV shows, Donna, that your dad watched, we kind of clicked on that, and I started working on a contract basis because I was a contract technical writer and editor. But pretty soon I was doing a lot of fill-in work. You know, Carl was the book is set, it starts in Cleveland based on a real drug murder that happened that they could never pin on Juju. I want to go back to say that Juju is a real bad guy based on a career criminal that Carl had multiple run-ins with, who fancied himself a voodoo practitioner. And then the story is fictionalized from the main murder, but there's a lot of cop stories running through the book, and they're more truth than fiction. And like Donna said, we have a lot of friends and families' names in there because they all wanted to be included in the book. But because Carl knew his environment so well, you know, you kind of take for granted where you live, what the streets are like, that kind of thing. But so I'd never been to Cleveland, and so we were filling in a little bit more information on Cleveland, on the streets. You know, where are these streets? A little bit of the history of Cleveland, and just because that was just information that I, as a reader, want to know, so I figure somebody else will want to know that too. And I got so involved in adding more to the book with Carl that he finally said, he invited me to be his co-author, and then I worked for free forevermore. So that's kind of how we got together, and we had a very easy style of working together. Carl would write, you know, and then he would send me what he had worked on, and I'd go through it and add to it and then send it back. And it was an amazing relationship because really writers can get very attached to their words. And Carl and I both wanted everything to be the best it was for the book, what makes the story move forward. We never got in disagreements. If there was a little point of, hey, you know, I really want to keep this, and this is why, mostly in Carl's references, it's because, yeah, the police really did do it a certain way, and he felt that keeping some particular piece of information in or a piece of dialogue
Procedural.
was crucial, that people actually really talked like this, and yes, they would do it this way. And so we just kind of worked on a very give and take basis, and you know, just our whole goal was to make this a great story.
And, you know, I really got a sense of that not only when I was reading it, but narrating it, it really does paint a good picture of Cleveland. Like I really the historical, I'm a history buff, so like finding out which landmarks have been there for how long, and even some of the bars and whatnot. It was pretty fascinating just to have that backstory, but also that the police procedural. I know that not only like would a police officer listen or read and go, oh yeah, but there's a lot of people that are really big into procedural stories, and so they're looking for that authenticity, and I think it was definitely came across here.
Yes. Hmm.
um so Donna, why make an audiobook?
Um, well, my dad did have plans for another book. Unfortunately, he can't do that. And everybody that reads the books, even like I get a lot of feedback like, oh, my dad doesn't even read a book and he couldn't put it down. He read it in a weekend, and like people are like, I read it again. They just really love the book. And like I said, I'm a nurse. And the one day I was at work and I was starting an IV on this gentleman, and he started talking to me, and I was like mid poke. I just stopped and I looked up and I'm like, you should do an audiobook. I can just listen to your voice forever. And here he was actually the voice of the Cavs. So I guess I did pick up that he was a professional voice person. And so I started talking about my dad's book, and I said, my dad always did talk about putting it on audio someday. Um, so this gentleman, I don't want to say his name because I don't know if he wants me to say his name in here, but he put me in contact with a gentleman. He was like, I did read a book for a police officer, a Cleveland police officer. And he goes, let me put you in contact with him. His name was Rick. I won't say his last name. And he put me in contact with Rick. And Rick actually used your company, was it the company that did the book? And he kind of like ACX. Okay. He talked me through like the whole thing and how do we find somebody like you to do the book? We auditioned, I don't know how many, 13 people did we get?
Yeah.
13 people. It was me, my mom, and my younger brother, and we kind of listened to everybody, and yours was the one that we liked the best. And so we're like, let's give it a shot and see what happens, because everybody kept saying this should be a movie. I wish I could listen in my car. A lot of people like to listen to audiobooks, so we're like, why not?
Whether they're jogging or on their way to work, or and I think it would make a great movie. So next step, right?
Yeah, there we go.
Let's see. So yeah, Tekla, will you talk a little bit about the audition process, so that how you guys work together to kind of narrow it down to, well, me?
Yeah. Yeah. So we went through ACX, Audible's, production arm, and I put together a little script based on a chapter of the book that I thought represented some character interaction and also some, action in the story. And so we put that out there as a script and asked for auditions. And we got quite a few people that auditioned. And I went through them first and then selected so many people or so many auditions, and then forwarded them to Donna so she and her family, could have the ultimate say in who's the voice of Bad Juju in Cleveland. And, frankly, yours stood out right away for me in a variety of ways. The uniqueness of your voice and the way that you put emotion into the reading and into the action scenes. I was really captivated by that. And plus, you really nailed the voice of Juju. And so I was really hoping that the family would agree with me that yours was the voice for Bad Juju in Cleveland. And I didn't tell them. I just said, I think one of these is outstanding, and I hope that you agree. and they did. So I was really glad.
It's nice to kind of hear that side of things. I mean, on my side, I see titles that are coming up that have auditions attached, and I read a little bit of the backstory, and then I read the script, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know if this is quite for me. This one definitely jumped out at me. But to hear your side of things, can you tell me what was working when voice actors were auditioning, and what are the things that you were like, this I can't handle this because of blank, you know? I think it's really helpful for people on my side of the microphone to kind of hear that from your perspective as a potential client and team member to work with from your perspective. That's open for either one of you. What you heard, what was good, what was not so good.
Again, like your voice is very distinctive, and you read with emotion, and you brought the words off the page, and that's what you want. Some of the other readers, they were a little flat in their delivery. They didn't lend any emotion to the characters' voices. And I think that was the major thing for me, is I was looking at who's going to bring this story alive.
Bring the book to life.
You agree with that, Donna?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I liked, your voice is very easy to listen to. Like I said, this gentleman I took care of, as soon as I heard him talk, I was like, I could listen to you talk all day. And that's kind of like how I felt when we heard you read. And different characters, had personalities. You brought their personalities out. And I like that. Instead of just reading and then he said, and then she said, and that's kind of like, well, that's what I do when I read. I want somebody else to entertain me a little bit. So.
Well, and a lot of it is remembering that each character has their own story,
Yeah. How did you like having all those characters to do?
It was a lot.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, my vocal range is only so big, but again, every character has their own story. So where are they coming from? When we discussed everything in the beginning, it was, not giving anyone too thick of an accent. But sometimes that's an easier way to differentiate the character. So I was like, this guy's got to have a little bit of an accent,
Yeah, and I think Thecla and I, that's the only really disagreement we had, is because I think everybody wanted it to be like a New York, Boston kind of accent.
Yeah.
But we're from Cleveland, and we don't talk like that. And we were trying to get it as true to my dad's voice as possible, like how my dad talked. And like, I know when I messaged you, I was like, or I told Thecla, I said, my dad did an interview. He wrote a letter to the editor. He always did letter to the editor. And he wrote a Cops and Donuts and why cops like donuts. And he did an interview. We went to the TV studio, and he did this big interview on why cops like donuts, blah, blah, blah. And my dad had like a little giggle kind of when he talked. He had a younger voice. And I know everybody kind of imagined him being some really thick New York or Boston kind of tough guy. But that's not who my dad was. Even as a police officer, he was gentle and he was kind, even though he was kind of a badass. Oh, he is a badass. But he wasn't a mean person. And, he was very fair. And I kind of wanted that to come through.
Yeah, I think especially as an actor, you think, a cop on the street, your mind automatically goes to, I'm the burnout detective who's drinking too much and, that kind of
My dad loved being a police officer, loved everything about it. Everything. Being president of the union, homicide. He did it all. I mean, I was just a little girl with pigtails playing with my Barbies at home, not even knowing the stuff my dad was doing. So,
he did some undercover work with the DEA, didn't he?
Yeah, he was actually sworn in, and I think he was one of the first ones ever. I do have a picture of that at his house. I'll give that to you later to put in here. But yeah, he was. His friend Frank Magooch worked for the DEA. He was a DEA officer, and Frank Magooch, right? That's a good name. And he brought my dad in to work with him. I used to babysit Frank's kids, and Frank brought my dad in to help with this case, and they actually swore my dad in. And I will find out for sure, but I think my dad was one of the first officers ever actually sworn in as a DEA agent.
Wow. He was also an adrenaline junkie. And when we were working on our second book, Angry Nurse, I believe he was down in Marathon, Florida.
That's where my uncle lived. Yeah, his brother.
So they were down in Marathon, Florida, and that's the year that Boston had that huge snowstorm where it just, feet and feet of snow. And they were calling an emergency response team, a national team together. And Carl was part of that team because I remember he got the call and he was leaving sunny Florida to head up to Boston to help wherever he could. He, wanted to be in the thick of things, and really,
he was a helper. He was a doer.
Yeah,
that's why he was a police officer. Then he became a nurse. Then he recreated himself as a author.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, my older brother is a police officer. I'm a nurse, emergency room nurse, and my younger brother is a firefighter. So,
wow,
I think we all followed in his civil servant giving back to everybody.
Well, it sounds like helping people is in the blood. So
yeah.
I just real quick going back to, you said Frank, and I'm not going to ruin it, but Frank Hartness was probably the most fun I had voicing in the book, and that character just cracks me up. like I listened to it the other day, and he has a story. Again, I won't ruin it, but his story in the bar, I was cracking up by myself just driving it. So
my dad had a gift to tell, like we would all just sit here and be like, my youngest son, my youngest son's name is Nicholas Silvano.
Oh, no kidding.
That's first and yeah. So
wow.
The Nicholas Silvano came. That's my dad's character in the book.
Yeah.
And my youngest son used to record him. He called it Story Time with Carl because my dad would just tell these outrageous stories, and I'm like, I am gonna fact check you on that one. So I have to call one of his buddies, and they're like, yeah, that really happened. I was like, dang.
I did the same thing. I did the same thing when we were writing together. I'd, be reviewing what Carl had sent, and I'd be reading one of these cop stories running through. And I said to him, there was kind of one about pretty outrageous. I'm not going to give it away right here. But I asked him, I said, how did you even make this up? And he said, Tekla, I didn't make it up. It happened. And I'm thinking,
exactly which one you're talking about.
How long ago did it happen? Did it happen like 5 years ago? Or he said, oh no, don't worry about it. That happened like 2 years ago.
It's past the statute of limitations.
Like I said, I work in the emergency room, and like everybody in our families, my husband's a firefighter. All 3 of my sons are Cleveland firemen, and my daughter's a vet tech. So my mom is the only non civil servant type person in the family, and we'd sit around telling stories, and she'd be like, how could you guys eat and talk about this, and that's not funny? And I'm like, Mom, we're gonna write a book. Can I swear on this? It's not a really bad word. I'm like, and the title's gonna be I can't make this shit up, because that's sometimes these stories are so outrageous they have to be true. And they are.
And we have never been dinged on the craziness and the authenticity, especially people in law enforcement or nursing. They recognize the authenticity in the crazy of the stories because those people have gone through similar things themselves.
Oh, it's nothing worse than watching something in the profession you do, and you're like, you don't do it that way. That's not how they do it. That's not what it's called. So my dad really did do. Like if he didn't know something related to nursing, because we used to laugh because I told him I'm an RN, I'm the real nurse, and you're just an LPN. So he would like ask me like, what is that called, or how would you do it? So my dad didn't just like make stuff up. Like if he didn't know it fully, he actually did do his research to make sure.
Well, and being the authenticity is definitely there, and when I was sending in the audio for Tekla to review, she'd be like, no, they don't pronounce it this way. They pronounce it that way. And it's like, and it's important, like even those little details for the people that are from Cleveland or, are in nursing, like you said, or cops. It is important to the story. But when you guys decided to choose me to do this project, I really, Tekla told me the backstory of Carl and you guys, and I wanted to do right by you.
Thank you.
And make sure that this was done right. So it was a little bit longer process than anticipated, but I felt
worth it.
I felt pretty good about it when it was done, and I hope you guys are happy with it.
Oh, my mom is starting to listen. She, I wanted to do this for my mom, first and foremost.
Nice.
Because she read the book a long time ago. She never read the third one. And the second one, I don't remember if she was there supporting my dad the whole time. He's like, ding, 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 looking up stuff. But she just kept saying, I just wish I could hear it. So that's when I came up. I'm sorry. That's when I was like,
No.
what if we get this into an audiobook? That way you can listen to Dad's story whenever you want. So, and then I met Marty at work, and it just all was, and Rick, the gentleman he put me in touch with, he would text me, email me, stuff like that. And then right before Christmas, he's like, can I call you? And I'm like, yeah. So he calls me and he was like, I knew your dad. And I'm like, you did? Now, mind you, everybody knows my dad, or my dad knows everybody. And he goes, I wanted to be a police officer. And I wasn't sure if it was going to happen. And somebody put me in touch with your dad, and they were like, if you want to be a police officer, go to Carl and he'll help you. And he says, your dad is the reason I'm a police officer. I was a police officer. So I said, you know what? That sounds like my dad.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Can we talk about the covers for a minute? Because the
Chris.
artwork on all three books, let me just say them again here. Bad Juju in Cleveland, Angry Nurse, and Bad Juju in the Eye of Oya. Obviously, Bad Juju is available on Amazon.com and Audible.com, and the print and versions of Angry Nurse and Bad Juju in the Eye of Oya are available on Amazon.com. Shameless plug. So let's there we go. So we'll start with Bad Juju in Cleveland. I tell you what, the graphics, the art definitely drew me right in, and like, what is this? So who did it and how did it come about?
My dad's friend, Chris Cheatham. My dad's been friends with Chris forever. He actually did some graphics for him when he was running for the CPPA, the Cleveland Police Patrolmen's Association. And like most people, once you meet my dad, you become a friend for life. And Chris and my dad were tight. And when my dad was ready to do a cover, he goes, I know exactly who I'm going to ask to do it. Because, Chris knew him, and I was from the area. So he got Chris to do the cover, who does graphic design. And I think he nailed it pretty much.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
I've had people tell me they couldn't leave that book on their bedstand at night because it's scary.
Scary.
So that's a good cover.
Yeah. Angry Nurse. You know why it's named Angry Nurse?
I'm assuming it has to do with well, yes, I did read the back, but why don't you go ahead and tell us?
No, that's not why it's called Angry Nurse. My dad, it's a joke. My dad's joke better than mine. My dad, like I told you, my dad worked in the psych unit at the same hospital I worked in the emergency room. And I'd come into work and they'd be like, oh, I gave a report to your dad. I'm like, you report to my dad? I'm like, yeah, in the psych unit. I'm like, oh, guys, my dad is not a nurse. He's a psych patient. He likes to tell everybody he's a nurse, but he's not. And my dad be like, stop telling everybody I'm a psych patient. I'm like, it's funny. He's like, it's not funny.
That is
and then he starts this book and everybody's like texting me, oh, is that book about you? Is it titled after you? I'm like, Dad, change the name. He's like, my joke's funnier than your joke. So Angry awesome. Nurse. And I'm not angry, but yeah.
So who did this cover?
Chris Cheatham.
Chris Cheatham. You did that one as well. Again, it does just draw your attention.
Yeah, that story is interesting. My dad, well, you're left-handed, you said, Mike, correct?
No, I just said, I forget what that reason, I forget what we were talking about. Anyway, go ahead. No, I'm not left-handed, but I'm left-brained, I guess.
Okay. Well, then this explains it. My dad was always thinking and being very creative and everything. So he liked Bad Juju, but he kind of wanted to veer off a little bit and kind of a little more make-believe. So I remember we went to T-Mobile. One of our friends works there. He still works there. His name's Dave. And he was like drilling Dave on some questions about, I'm not going to go into the book, but about something about a phone and hiding it and all this other stuff. So my dad actually thought about this book right immediately after he finished the first one. Like he was always thinking of the next book.
Was he set on Detective Nicholas Silvano from the very beginning? Like, this is my main focus, and he's going to have lots of stories.
Yeah.
And another story about Angry Nurse is Carl and I were working on Angry Nurse together when we first met in person. My husband and I and he and his wife Cheryl vacationed together in Marathon, Florida for about 10 days. And we stayed in a condo together. Now, we'd never met each other before. You know, Carl and I had a relationship, but Cheryl and my husband didn't know each other or us, you know. And it was kind of a bait and switch. We thought we were getting this resort style place with, you know, two bedrooms and then a shared common area. But what it really ended up being was the little no-tell motel
Oh, no.
on the side that they had turned into little condominium rooms. We were in basically a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom that we kind of all fit in together and shared for 10 days, and we made it work and we all got along. Carl and I worked on Angry Nurse for, you know, all morning, and then in the afternoons we'd go do something.
Right.
And we also had our first and only joint book signing for our presentation for Bad Juju in Cleveland at the Marathon Library. And so another story that I'd like to tell about that is we're in the middle of this book signing, and a gentleman asked Carl, well, what's Juju doing now? And Carl, who kept up with the websites or whatever, he said, he must have looked him up and said, well, I see he just got released from jail on some charge or another. And then Carl kind of looked at me sideways, and I looked at him and I said, you told me he was dead. And he said, well, I thought that would make you feel better. I said, well, it did.
He's real and he's still here. Yep.
So everybody laughed about that. But he said that if Juju ever came across these books or anything, that he would think it was pretty cool that he made it in the book. So.
Right. But the ending of Bad Juju in Cleveland, I won't give it away, but that's not really how my dad caught him. But my dad said I have to be nice, because if Juju ever was to read these books, I didn't want him coming after me. So
yeah.
Well, and you know, the story is fictionalized, so
this one is, yes.
Yeah.
And Angry Nurse is based on his experiences and characters that he came across on both the administrative sides and the, you know, patient side on the behavioral health unit. And so it's not based on any one particular incident or person. So that's how
they loved him in the psych unit, because he was a retired police officer.
So he really knew how to handle people. Yeah. Well, and the third in the series, Bad Juju and the Eye of Oya. Is this also Chris?
Yes, all three are Chris.
And Chris won a national award, a National Graphic Artist Award for this cover.
Well, all three of them jump out in their own unique way, for sure. He's really good at what he does.
Yes. I actually have a picture of Chris. There was a police, like a show, where you would sell badges and memorabilia. And we went last year and sold a bunch of books at it. And I invited Chris to come. And I'll share that picture with you so you can kind of put a face, like you put a face to the name of him with all of his work. Because, you know, he's like, no, I don't want anything. I don't put my picture out there. He's very humble. Like, he's like, oh, it's no big deal. And I'm like, it is a big deal. Because if the cover isn't eye-catching, then, you know, you're going to pass it up.
Well, we can tell people not to judge a book by its cover, but it's still got to grab you.
Yes,
you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's see. I think I have one more slide with all of them.
Yeah, I took that down at the marina. That's in the books. East 55th. It's a real place, and my dad does have a boat there. So I took that picture down. That's Cleveland.
So we hope that everybody will check out Bad Juju in Cleveland on Audible, or the paperback and ebook are available on Amazon.com.
And leave feedback.
Please leave reviews.
Yes.
We're a grassroots marketing team, and we rely heavily on our reader reviews of our books. So please leave a review.
I know it sounds cliche at this point, but feed the algorithm, because it really does make a difference, especially the reviews, likes, all that fun stuff. Amazon and whatnot does pay attention to that, and I think they start promoting once you get more and more reviews.
Mhm.
But I want to say thank you, both of you, for joining me today. And I think this is kind of a nice little behind the curtain, behind the scenes, between the family, the writers, and the voices. So
Well, Tekla, we couldn't have done it without you.
Well, Donna, it is my pleasure. It's an honor, and I do miss your dad. And Mike, thank you for bringing everything. You made it real. You made it real.
I love it. Yes.
You made the story come alive.
well,
My dad would be so happy. Mind you, he probably never would have done this, because he was always like, I'd be like, Dad, I would be at work. I'm like, hey, bring up 20 books. He's like, why? I'm like, I sold 20 books for you. Bring them up here and sign them. I'd make him sit there at the nurse's station and sign the books so I can sell them to people. He would never promote it. He was like, it's no big deal, but I will, because I thought they're special. And he couldn't have done it without Thakla. Trust me.
We were a good team.
Absolutely a great team.
Well, obviously, it's a great story, and I look forward to reading the other ones. And as far as it goes, right now, oh, look at that, real life. As far as everything else goes, check out Bad Juju in Cleveland on Amazon.com and Audible.com, and also check out Bort Madsen Books on Facebook. And you guys have anything else to add?
Thank you, guys, both of you.
Yep,
Thank you very much. Oh, don't worry, I'll cut this part out.
Okay.
I'm recording. Okay.